curvy arms. In order to get some parallel clamping pressure on the chair, I'm going to make some cauls out of common 2x6 lumber. I'm going to take an assembled chair side, trace it out, then using a circular saw I'm going to cut it along the lines that I traced. Now with the chair clamped up in the cauls, using a square marked at a predetermined distance, I'm going to mark where I want the bottom of the armrest to rest on this piece of wood. I've already marked the distance I want the armrest to overhang the front of the leg. So I line that mark up with the front of the leg, and I line the bottom edge with the line I marked here with the square. I do a similar thing with this mark that I made with the square. Bring the edge of the armrest right up to it there. With that lined up, I mark the bottom of the armrest where they intersect the legs, and then I mark the legs where the bottom of the armrest is at. So I'm going to have to make a tenon there. And then I can disassemble this side of the chair. Using the lines that I marked at the armrest intersection, I'm going to actually move them up 1/4 of an inch. That'll give me a bit of a tenon into a dado that I'll cut on the bottom of the armrest. That way there's no gaps along that cut line. Now I could use the marks I made on the bottom of the armrest where they intersect with the legs and line them up with where I want to mark my cut. These two lines 1/4 inch up from the intersection that I marked earlier. Then I can just trace it out. And I can cut that on the bandsaw. So here are the two marks that I made between the legs. Fits in there nice. Before we forget, we got to label these joints as well. They'll match the joints that we already have. So now that we've cut the rail to match the armrest here, you can still see that there's some waviness here. And I don't want that to be seen. So instead I'm going to route a channel out here that the rail will fit in. And this will give me a nicer looking edge than the wavy cuts. I used a thin piece of wood here so it would be able to rock back and forth as much as possible. If it were any wider, this would sit a bit higher and wouldn't necessarily touch the wood. So this should allow me to go along this way. Then I added 2 runners that give me just the width of this rail. And then I'll just go progressively deeper with each pass until I get about 1/4 or so inch down, because that's how much I added on the ends of these here. One of the classic characteristics of the Morse chair is the through tenons from the legs through the armrests. In this case it's going to be difficult because I can't have the tenons pinching in like this, otherwise I won't be able to get the armrest onto the legs. They have to be completely vertical so it would just set down. That might prove a little too difficult for me, so I'm not going to even attempt that. What I will be doing is I'll be doing an inlay on the top with some walnut on top to make it look like there's a through tenon, but it won't be an actual through tenon. When laying out this cut up here, I traced right where the armrest is going to sit on this piece of wood here with this line here. It's 1/4 inch below the top. While laying that out, I also marked where it's going to rest on the legs here. Similarly, we'll add 1/4 inch and cut it off there. The bottom of our armrest, we've already cut or routed out the dado for this piece of wood, and then we'll add a square dado underneath the armrest as well to fit the legs. That should give us a nice tight fit and good glue joints for everything to be held together. Now when laying out the armrest, I marked everything on the flat side. Remember, I got a flat side here at a 90-degree angle, and then these two sides are tapered. So referencing off of this flat side here, I'm going to drop a line down here and a line down the front of the leg. Now on this side, I just got to bring the lines around the corner. I can just use a straight edge to connect them. And now I've got my line to cut on, and having the flat side on the saw. Even though we won't be doing any through tenons with the legs, I still got to clear out a pocket for it to fit in. That way I get a nice line with the leg here. Decided to use a 1.5 inch forstner bit. That'll give me a 1.5 inch circle that I can make square rather than the 2 inches that I was originally planning on, because getting a 1.5 inch square end grain out of a 8/4 inch piece of wood is a lot easier than getting 2 inch square pieces of end grain out of an 8/4 inch piece of wood. So I've got some Gorilla tape marking a 1/4 inch on the forstner bit, and I'm just going to drill in. I've got all my centers marked. I can just make a 1/4 inch deep, 1.5 inch wide hole. Use the gauge here to mark off the edge of the circle here. See, I'm so close I'm starting to splinter it here. And use a marking knife and a square and get the top sides. Now it's just a matter of chiseling it out. Glad I went with the 1.5 inch squares, because this is a piece of cutoff from the legs and it's just slightly bigger than what I need here, so we're good there. Now, because these are hand cut, they're not all exactly the same size. So what I need to do is I need to find the biggest one, because that will tell me the widest I need to cut this blank, and then I can either widen out the mortise or shorten the inlay, but I can't go the opposite way. So far, this direction over here seems to be our widest point. You can see we're just a little bit shy of this, so this is a great size to have. So I'll register it up against the corner here. It's actually fine along this edge back here. It's just along this edge where it's kind of tight. So I'll take a marking knife. And I'll just mark along the edge. You can see the line right here that I put there. I just come in with a chisel and knock that out. Now I no doubt should have had these cut before I started doing the mortises here. It would sped things up quite considerably. But it is what it is, and I'll learn next time. And since I get to inlay this, I get to make some decisions here. The grain is kind of going this way here, and this grain is kind of going this way. So I can kind of lay it in there so it kind of goes with the grain, or I can set the grain almost perpendicular to the grain of the armrest. I think I'm going to go with that. I like the way that looks. I brought the armrest over to the drill press over here, and I'm going to be drilling on what's going to be the inside of the armrest. Here's the leg right here, and this is going to be the outside. Pegs are going to go in here, and it's going to be able to control how far back the seat can recline. So these are going to be 5/8 inch holes on 1 inch centers all the way back. Well, between here and here. I've added some square supports here to make sure that the armrest is perfectly square with the drill bit. So now the glue is dried, they're in there pretty good. I'm going to cut these off with a flush cutting saw. I'm going to use the fine side. It's going to make some marks on here, but I don't care because I haven't sanded this yet. You can still see that there's glue and such here and down here. Put a finger up against here, start going back and forth. little bit of planing and that'll come right off. Using some free plans I found online, I marked off the dimensions on the armrest itself and drew a line. And then I found that a penny gives me just about the radius I want on the corners. So let me cut this on the bandsaw. Alright, so some of my glue laminations didn't quite come together, which is kind of weird because like down deeper inside they came together just fine, but like up here there's little gaps. So I got to try and fill those in. I could use like epoxy or something like that, but I'm going to try using some glue and some sawdust that I saved when I was actually cutting all these up. Now comes the fun part where we get to mush it all into the cracks. Had some issues with the top layer of the glue laminated armrest here, and I'm going to fix it by putting in some black epoxy. Alright, let's see what we got. So we finished with the arms. Be sure to subscribe down below so you see what's coming up next in this series. If you like this one, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.